I'm Sue Stockdale, and welcome to the Access to Inspiration podcast, where you can be inspired by people who may be unlike you. We hope their experiences enable you to transcend your day-to-day challenges and reflect on what you are capable of achieving. This week's guest I'm speaking to is Vinay Chandra, who might describe himself as a serial entrepreneur. He is CEO of High Peak Software, based in India and Atlanta in the US. And during his career, he has founded and grown many businesses. Welcome to the podcast, Vinay.
Thank you, Sue. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, I'm really intrigued to find out a little bit about what motivates you to want to go through that experience of founding or taking a business and growing it to the next level and doing it more than once.
Well, Sue, I really have not done anything else in my life other than entrepreneurship. That's a very strange answer to your question. Ever since I got out of university, it's been sort of a combination of accidents as well as circumstances which made me get into entrepreneurship, and I've never looked back. I'm really a very excitable character. I love new things. I don't have a lot of patience to keep doing the same thing again and again. So a lot of those things combined together in me wanting to do something new and starting new ventures.
I am fascinated by how you see it as not doing the same thing time and time again. I guess I want to come back to the start, first of all, and just tell us a little bit about your growing up, your childhood, and perhaps how that influenced your approach to life.
I'm actually, as we speak, sitting in Bangalore, India. This is where I originally come from. But in that sense, I really don't originally come from here because I was actually born in Auburn, Alabama, in the midst of the civil rights era going back in the early 70s. My dad used to be a professor at Auburn, and I happened to be born there. And we moved back when I was fairly young, about 2 years old, into Bangalore. And my dad continued his professorship at the local university here. So my growing years were spent in India. And India back then was a very socialist country. It didn't have a lot of entrepreneurship in its original sense. There was a lot of state-run enterprise. My dad actually started up his company. And during these times, everything was heavily licensed. And if you had to start something up, you had to actually get a license and do things from there. So my dad actually got out of his professorship, which was a very plum job, and decided to challenge himself because he was sick and tired of the established hierarchy and the way things were being done, and decided to start up a business after getting some licenses. So that was really in the midst of me growing up when I was fairly young, when I was about 8 years old. So in that sense, I saw him make the change from being professor and an academician into being an entrepreneur, and the uphill task that he faced with governmental regulations and how he had to set his business up from scratch, raising capital in a very difficult capital market, which was back then, banks would not lend to new businesses. I really saw that, and I guess that was what my growing years were like till the age. And I spent time in India till I was 18 years, till I finished my high schooling, and then moved to Boston for my undergraduate education. And I got degrees in mathematics and electrical engineering from Boston University. That was essentially a little bit in terms of how I grew up.
So you had perhaps a degree of inspiration from your father and observing his experience as a teenager.
Very much so. That was what I lived and breathed, actually, seeing him struggle through the travails of entrepreneurship. And he was a first time entrepreneur too, and he had no idea how this entire process worked. Being a technocrat, being a professor, one doesn't really prepare themselves for the realities of how things actually work on the ground, because there's a reason why university is called the ivory tower. It's really hard. And when you actually step out onto the real world, you get hit in the face with all the practicalities. And back then, India was a super difficult place for one to start up a business. This was the late 70s, and it was not easy for him in any sense. Everything that you did was licensed, and you had to get a ton of permits just to start up a free enterprise. So that was what I lived through and was influenced by.
So once you had done your academic studies, did you go straight into starting up your own business after that? Or did you continue on in the world of academia yourself?
I was supposed to go do my master's degree. I had an offer from a very prestigious university. But being the inquisitive and excitable guy that I am, the plan that I actually had was to take a year off and bicycle through India. So I got out of university and bought myself a bike and a kit and was about to get on my bike. And India suddenly landed up in a very tumultuous year. This was the end of 1992. There were some major communal riots in India. And because of which I had to cancel my plans. So it was a very difficult year in India. Then I was trying to figure out what to do next. And what I ended up with was actually trying to help my father with his business. So he had landed up in some difficult circumstances at that time. There were some very strict or very rapid change of governmental regulations which had happened at that time. Between the years 90 to 92 in India were very tumultuous. India was literally bankrupt. It did not have enough foreign exchange reserves because of the socialist nature of the country and the economy. And the government made some very rapid series of changes. And my dad had just gone in for an expansion of his business and imported a lot of equipment from Europe. And just as the equipment landed up on the port, we found out that the customs duty had been raised by 200%.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it was quite a shock because the business had been planned. The business was actually growing pretty well. But unfortunately, we found ourselves at the receiving end there a little bit because we now didn't have the capital. It was a couple of $1 million back then worth of capital. And we suddenly had to figure out how to raise 200% of that to pay governmental duties, which make no sense at all. And my first experience was actually trying to figure out the Chapter 11 for a business that had been in existence for a reasonably long period of time, 150 employees, and trying to figure out how to rekindle the company and make it stand on its ground. So in the end, I spent about a year and a half trying to do that. It was an amazing experience, really nose on the ground, trying to save the business, trying to raise capital, trying to work with the lenders, trying to work with the governmental agencies, which all came to naught. So we had to close the business down. So that was my first experience in entrepreneurship.
So one might imagine that having gone through that, I'm imagining, daunting experience of trying to save a business and being unsuccessful, that it might have put you off and you would have gone a different route. So what happened next then? How did you pick yourself up from that situation and move forwards?
I was very glad that at that point of time, I was extremely motivated in the sense that I had just come back from the US, freshly educated, so called, from stepping down from the ivory tower and seeing the reality of it. So I had a lot of energy, to so to say. So I was able to look at this through rather rose colored glasses and not let it touch me as hard as it should have touched me. It was a very, very difficult scenario because my family had a lot of personal guarantees in this. So we pretty much lost everything in this process and had to start afresh. And I figured, this is what it is. Unfortunately, we don't have control over all aspects of our life and we just have to roll with it. So I rolled with it and I didn't necessarily know what I was going to do next. So I began by investigating some of the things that I had done. And this was a manufacturing setup that I was in with my father. And I figured the best thing that I could do was continue with this manufacturing because that was a core competence that I had built. So I eked out some of the savings that I had and went to Germany and went to a manufacturing business fair just to see what was around. And I happened to meet a rather interesting person who was an inventor and who had a few patents manufacturing some energy saving lighting. We were in the early days of energy saving back then. It was something close to my heart. So I said, this is something that we could really work with. How about I go back and start working with this, see if I could set up a facility in India doing these energy saving lighting. So I got back on the treadmill, raised a little bit of money from friends and family, and started working with this gentleman from Germany. So that was my next foray into entrepreneurship.
So I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Vinay today, and that you will find lots of other episodes in our back catalogue for you to listen to about entrepreneurship, including Alicia Silberg, who is a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, and John Miles, whose business improves economic prosperity for those living in Venezuela. And if you hop on over to our website, accesstoinspiration.org, you will find them all there, along with the transcriptions for each episode. I'm getting the sense of your belief in possibilities and looking for new opportunities. Would you say that those are two things that are part of your personality?
Yeah, absolutely. I have this never look back type of attitude. So keep looking forward and keep looking at potentials that can come your direction. So that was one of the things that I did. I saw that this was a pretty interesting opportunity, and India was in its early stage of energy saving. And I thought there could be tremendous amount of benefits to the country as a whole. So I decided to get into that.
And was that business ultimately successful?
No, unfortunately, it was not. Right. So, one of the things that I realized is you have to make sure you find the right partners. So, in this scenario, the person that partnered with, he was an amazing technician. He had patented a bunch of things, but he was a pretty lousy businessman. So, what really happened was there was a lot of planning that I had done, fundraising that I had done, and hadn't reckoned with some crazy behavior on the part of my partner from Germany. So, net of net, I had to close down that business because it did not work. And right around that time, he also went bankrupt in his company in Germany. So that was rather unfortunate, but I was able to pick up from that and follow through. By then, I had had a pretty good understanding of this particular business. So I actually moved to Germany at that point of time because I knew the business, I knew what the customers wanted. So, together with somebody else that I had met and I had established a good relationship with in Germany, we decided to pick up the assets of this bankrupt company because we knew it well, and decided to move it forward and see how we could turn it around. So, that was venture number three that took me to Germany from India.
And I understand perhaps that the actual location in Germany where you were wasn't necessarily exactly conducive to how you would show up in the world.
Yes, so that was actually pretty interesting. I grew up in a vegetarian family and a non alcoholic family. So, all through my university, I followed that ethos and followed it pretty strictly. And here I was, all of 25 years old and in Germany in a small village of about 15 people, believe it or not. And there were about 500 hogs and 100 cows together with that. And that was where this factory was located. They employed about 20 people. So I landed up in this place in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Franconia. People did not speak German there. They spoke a dialect called Franconian, Frankish in German. So me not speaking German was an asset because any normal high speaking German who came in there did not understand the language. So it made no sense anyway. So I figured, let me learn from scratch. So here I was in this little village of 15 people, a colored individual with absolutely no foreigners in the radius of, I would say, about 50 kilometers. At least the nearest town was the town of Nuremberg. So it was very interesting, the whole experience. I was very welcomed. People were excited to see me. I was the youngest person in the company. I didn't speak the language. I looked different. So, in that sense, I broke every possible mold that I could going into a very traditional, hierarchical, old fashioned business setup in Germany. So, I guess I fit in perfectly from that scenario.
So, Vinay, tell me, how do you adapt when faced with those circumstances that many people might find quite threatening or even overwhelming?
It's usually a sink or swim approach, Sue. It is quite life threatening, right? So if you don't adapt, you die. It's as simple as that. So here I was, the vegetarian, non alcoholic, in the middle of pork eating, beer guzzling Germany. There were 15 people, obviously, in that village. There was a brewery. There were 15 breweries in a radius of probably 5 kilometers. And there was no such thing as vegetarian food because even the salad came with bacon in it. So that was the thing. So I managed with rice and yogurt, which was a pretty staple South Indian thing, for about 2 weeks. And that was it. And then I said, that's it. So why not get into it? And the best way to endear yourself to people is get in and share a meal with people. So that's what I have found in all my travels and in being around the world, working with different kinds of people. If you break bread with people, it is an amazing experience, and it is the most disarming thing that you can do. After a few weeks, I said, okay, enough of it. And then I got into managing to eat everything around me and managing to enjoy beer. And since then, I love beer. I can eat anything that moves, literally. And that's how I've survived. It's quite amazing once you take your mental hangups out and you start looking at it from a lens of this is what one needs to do to survive. You get through it and you start managing everything. Nothing becomes impossible after that. So I continued along the trajectory of manufacturing, and then I sold that business in Germany. So, and fast forward, the business which I started in 2011 actually is where I am right now. It's mostly software development. We not only build software for ourselves, we also help other companies build their product software. So we do both of it. We are a software product development company as well as an internal product development company. So a lot of it revolves around AI. And that's something, while it's been a buzzword, it's something we've been doing for the last 5 years, actually.
So that's artificial intelligence you're talking about. Where do you see the world of artificial intelligence going?
There has been a lot of progress in AI, I would say, in my academic and business lifespan over the last 30 years. It was actually one of the things that I studied about back in university when I was in Boston. Unfortunately, we just did not have the computing power back then to realize a lot of things that were happening. And I actually worked with a team at a university which resulted in Siri today. So Siri, what you use in your iPhone, comes from a team that I worked with back in the early 90s. So it takes a long time for some of this technology to actually incubate and come out and get to the next level. AI is one such thing because a massive amount of computational power that is required to get things done. So over the last 5 years, computational power has increased. Cloud computing obviously has helped to a great deal. Companies like Google and Microsoft and Apple have been very instrumental in pushing this technology forward, partly because they have access to a tremendous amount of publicly sourced data. You and I are glad to use Gmail free of cost and give them access to our data and our photos on Google Photos or wherever else. And these companies are happy to take this free information and essentially turn their AI technologies on top of it, which has resulted in a lot of advancement in the AI field. So a lot of that, what you see today, is as a result of some of these large companies turn on their computation power. And this industry is moving very, very rapidly, making strides every year into dimensions that we previously not thought possible. So we are also helping in our own small way in this particular area. So we are contributing in manufacturing as well as in services with a couple of our AI products. One of the things that is happening is actually helping remove mundane things that people do. So, as I told you at the beginning, I'm a rather excitable guy and I don't like to do repetitive tasks again and again. So, that's one area where AI does come in. So, there's a lot of repetitive things that are done in businesses that can easily be taken over by AI systems and done. Inspection is one such area within a factory. It could take the form of reviewing documents with a lawyer, for example.
Vinay, with all of those ventures that you have undertaken, if you look back now and reflect on what you have learned about being an entrepreneur, what do you think are the important messages that you could give to other people about entrepreneurship?
First of all, have a very, very supportive partner at home. You can't go anywhere without ensuring that your spouse or significant other is 150% behind you and has your back. Because entrepreneurship is one of the most difficult things that you can do in your life. It's not an easy place to be. especially because most entrepreneurs are low on resources, high on energy. And obviously, energy doesn't pay your bills. And that's always a tough area. So if you don't have a supportive partner, you are not going to get anywhere. That's only going to make your life a lot more miserable. So shore that side of a bit up and make sure that if you are signing on a partner, make sure you tell him or her what they're in for and they know what the real truth of it is. Second thing is you have to be able to challenge your beliefs every single day. It is, you cannot hold fast to a single belief and say, I'm going to live or die by this. You have to make sure you consider evidence that contradicts your beliefs all the time. And in a lot of cases, admit the possibility that you are just plain wrong. That's a very, very important thing. And also knowing that when you're wrong, it's okay to reset and reboot. It's just plain impossible to know everything. But it's also knowing that you have the ability to challenge everything that you know. And that's what entrepreneurship is about. It's okay to challenge those things that you know, come up with new assertions, and go out and do your things. So that's also one more thing that's actually helped me out. The third thing is having the ability to keep your feet on the ground, but your head in the clouds. It's a tall thing to do, obviously, but you have to know when reality is reality and at the same time have the ability to future think and dream. It's a very difficult scenario when you're faced with the possibility of not being able to make payroll this month. But you have to now think about your product that is going to come down the road and that is going to be successful in a year or two's time, right? So you have to have that ability to keep that longer term time frame vision within you and have the ability to drive yourself towards that. Being bipolar in that sense is also a very entrepreneurial quality, and being able to manage those things without letting that affect you or demoralizing you is a very important quality as well. So those are some of the few things that I have found to be very helpful to me.
And how do you keep yourself motivated? I'm thinking it sounds like there's a bit of a rhythm that you're involved in taking a venture, either starting it up from scratch or taking it over, growing it, and then finding a time that it's time to leave and move on to the next thing, to sell it or whatever. How do you know when it's time to effectively fold, leave that and move on to something else?
Obviously, the easiest thing to do is when it fails, you move on, right? So that's an easy one. Not everything that you touch is going to succeed. And if everything that you touch actually succeeds, then it's actually a strange phenomenon and you haven't been lucky enough, because I think the best thing that can happen to an entrepreneur early enough in their career is to have failures, because failures are the foundation to success. In my present business, at least, I have a bunch of entrepreneurs within my company. So, which means that we have micro businesses within the company. We have micro ideas which are being incubated and multiple businesses being incubated at the same time. So, we set up these teams of micro entrepreneurs and they go out and work with their internal and external customers and build their products. So, for me, I put my finger and dabble in a bunch of different things at the moment. I have the ability to get in and out of some of these things on a day to day basis. So I keep myself very, very motivated. And in each of these teams, we've got young folks who are very energetic. I see a lot of me in them, and it really excites me and motivates me to mentor these people and work with them as they make their mistakes and as they grow their small businesses internally and work with their customers. So that keeps me extremely interested and excited.
So, my final question to you, Vinay, is if you could go back to the start as a young boy and knowing now what you know about entrepreneurship, how do you think you would look on it as a young boy?
it is really the journey that matters and not the destination. And entrepreneurship, from that perspective, is a journey. You have to enjoy every single day of the journey. It's akin to you being on a multi-day hike and you're actually enjoying the scenery. You're not thinking about where you're getting to at the end, but it's the small steps in between that you're enjoying, and the air that you're breathing, the streams that you're crossing, the little stumbles that you're taking along the way, which really matter. So that is what one needs to enjoy. Don't look at it as get rich quick scheme. It's not the case. That's never going to happen. Nothing in life happens quick. And if it has happened quick, you're fortunate. At the same time, unfortunate because you haven't had the essence of the journey. So follow the journey and make the most of the journey. It's really all about the journey.
So it sounds like the richness comes from the richness of experience rather than just purely financial wealth.
Yes, and if you have the right motivation and the right attitude, financial motivation comes to you at the end of it. It is the result of what you're doing. Yes. If you're not thinking about it too much, it will come to you. It's one of those things. It's actually a very karmic thought. Do the task at hand in a fully fulfilled way, and the results will come to you. You don't have to necessarily think about the results. And if that is a result that has to come to you, it will come to you. If it is yours, it will come to you.
Wise words on which to leave our conversation, Vinay. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you today and get your insights about entrepreneurship and life. And if people want to find out more about you and your business and what you do, how might they do that on the internet?
They can visit us on www.highpeaksw.com. So High Peak Software is the name of the business. And it was truly a pleasure to talk to you today, Sue. I'm glad to have conveyed a few of the tidbits that I've learned along my life, along the way with you.
Thank you very much, Vinay. Thanks for listening today. Vinay Chandra's story reminded me about resilience and how we all need to develop ways to bounce back quickly when things don't work out as we planned. If you enjoyed what he had to say, then leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. Next week, our guest will be sharing his insights on what it takes to achieve medal success in endurance running over 4 Olympiads. Dr. Barry Fudge was head of endurance at British Athletics and has worked with some of the world's top athletes. So you'd better look out your training shoes and be ready to apply his insights and tips on improving your running. Look forward to being with you then.